are about to be reborn. Are you ready for life?
Are you ready for life?
Ready for life?
Gotta be a
Let's
song.
sing.
Oh no.
Oh, yes, it worked. We are here.
Nice. Hey, Kevin. I love your outfit.
Thanks.
Hey, everybody. Hey, oh my God, 2 people are watching. I'm so happy to see you people.
I hope it's not Galad. Get in here.
Gilad, if you want, just get in here. As soon as you finish whatever you're doing in real life. Okay, welcome in the first Mining for Vervaeke podcast. So one evening we gathered on a Discord server on the awakening from the Minion crisis. And we talked about explaining John's language to our friends. It was like a very chill conversation, and that's how we came up with the idea of the podcast, where we will discuss specific terms, and those are multiple, like reciprocal narrowing, domicide, and so on. Like, there are more of them. We have like the list and stuff. And today I welcome Valeria, Algernon, and Kevin Flower, members of the Awakening from the Meaning Crisis Discord server. We will be discussing today the term called domicide. Like the first time I heard this term used in Awakening from the Meaning Crisis podcast that John has on John Vervaeke has on his YouTube channel, and Kevin narrowed it down to episode 13 and 14. I remember it connected to Hellenistic period, and also the times where Alexander kind of reshaped settling of the people. So let's say people from north had to be settled south, and they didn't have the same neighbors around. They were in countries with foreign languages, countries that believe in different gods, let's say. And yeah, there is this strong feeling of lost home. I Googled the precise term for domicide, and I could not find a like more or less understandable, intelligible term. That's why it's here on this panel. Okay. Guys, I would like to give word first to Valeria. Valeria, how do you understand that term?
I think that if I would try to understand domicide, I think the first thing that I would try to understand is home. Like having a place where you feel at home, a community where you feel at home, where you know the culture, you know the language, you know the people, you have roots there. You have this feeling of knowing who you are because and how you fit into with the people, with the place around you. And if you get a feeling for that, because I think a lot of us don't have that anymore, right? I barely know my neighbors in the building where I live. But being in a place where everybody knows everybody, where everybody has this shared vision, this feeling of community, and then you compare that to not having that anymore. That is what I would associate with the feeling of domicide.
For sharing that. Kevin, how do you understand it?
Well, I guess there is So there's at least two ways this can happen, right? There's kind of a literal thing of like losing the physical destruction of your house. And if people have had that happen to them, that might be kind of a way to relate to this notion. But then there's this other variation of it where you still have a house, you have like a place to live in. But it's more like the cultural domicide that I think Valeria was pointing to. And yeah, I was thinking about this. I was trying to think about during this week about like, when have I like experienced that? And it's very much in line with what Larry was saying, where it's like, it's in situations where I lived, in a city, for several years, and I got, it was kind of small enough to where, there's like a handful of places you could go to socialize. And you start to, get a sense of like, who the people were and what the activities were available. And then I remember moving out of that city, and then like having just this complete sense of like, oh man, I don't even know what to do. Like where do I go? Like, what? There's no, there was like no kind of intuitive sense of how to navigate the new space I was in. And yeah, I think that's probably a generally relatable thing. Example, actually, I think that Rafe Kelly kind of gave in his conversation with John Vervaeke, or at least one of them, which was on the topic of domicide, was how kids from different backgrounds were moved into a poor region of Paris, and in order to kind of compensate for that, they actually tried to do parkour, which gave them some way to, in an embodied way, to interact with the environment. And even though they came from like radically different backgrounds, and even though they were like in a situation where they didn't really know where they fit in to the culture, they were able to kind of make their own space. And yeah, so I think that's an important kind of dynamic of like both the sense of loss of how to participate, and then how does one reclaim it. And maybe a last point is that like whenever you move into a new place, or like if you move into some like room that you're renting, or a new house, we do these things where we like kind of we start putting things up that don't actually have any like functional utility, but it's just kind of like symbolized. Okay, this is like I have a painting on my wall over here. It's like been with me kind of wherever I move. And so that's like, for me, kind of I'm homing, whatever place I happen to move into. So I think there are things like that we do to try to deal with that sense of disconnection and being unhomed, I guess, or homeless, right? It's another way to say it. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Interesting. I like the parkour. And I think I would like to further discuss, just remind me guys if I will forget it, the ways to cope. And Algernon, yes, to cope.
I guess I'll emphasize of that this idea of interactivity and connection and relationship. So like if you interact with both the place in the case of parkour, if you're interacting with people, and I think it has to be like a back and forth or with your family and whatnot, because it ends up defining the relationship between you and whatever the other thing is, like an overtime interaction between it. It's kind of like roots. I think it's a good analogy. Like you have roots in a place because you have this relationship to this club that you go to and the school that you go to and the people at church and the whatever, all of those things together forms your kind of home, where you feel home, you feel part, you feel a member of. And so if you have that, then you're like, we're good. And if you don't have that, then I think it's like a natural human thing to try to build it, to like construct it with whatever's around you. And I think in the case of the parkour story, like that was part of what was happening, was they were like forming a new tribe, because they sort of felt like there was something more than some connection. So I see domicide as basically when all those things, and I think is like many tendrilled along a lot of different dimensions, when all that connection to place and people and even ideals start to, I want to say rot, but like dissolve, then that is like heading toward domicide. That's kind of how I see it.
Like, for me, it's change of your environment completely. It's like the fish that had been taken out of fish tank into a different fish tank. It's like a completely different water, different pH and stuff. That fish experiences domicide. Like, I don't do that to my fish. I try not. So when you have to accustom either fish or shrimp, introduce them into new environment, you actually keep them for a few hours floating in a bag inside, so they get accustomed to the temperature and the kind of colors. Then you have to add a little bit of water, a little bit of water, and a little bit of water from the fish tank, so they like get used to the actual, I don't know, flavor. And I have changed countries. I noticed the air is different, not even the language, air. So, like, language is understandable, but breathing in and you can feel that it's like different. Provided I'm from small countryside in Ukraine, I came to capital of Poland, to Warsaw. It was like cultural shock, everything. Big surprise. And I remember kind of holding on to the past, like little things, like pictures of my family, my mom, just to keep a little bit at home. Yeah, even many years in Poland, each time I would talk, people would be like, "You're not from here. Like, you look like one of us, but you're definitely not from here," just by the manner of my speaking. And it's this weird sensation that not only nobody knows me, nobody knows my father, my mother, my family, like in the small village they would. I'm a stranger to everyone. Plus, I'm not one of them because of my language. I have an accent. I'm like an Eastern European. And I remember that funny story. They're like Polish ladies gathering on a dinner, and they asked me, "Where are you from?" I said, "I'm from Ukraine." And they're like, "Oh," like one of them said, "My cleaning lady is from Ukraine. I treat her very well." And I was like, did not know what to come up with. And so I said, "Oh, my cleaning lady is from Poland. I also treat her very well." And it was a lie. I'm sorry. But I mean, the thing I told to that lady.
That's interesting, right? You're in a different country, and then sometimes people get upset at you because for reasons that you don't have a clue why. It's like you're just doing you have the feeling that you're doing something wrong, but you have no idea what it is that you're doing wrong, or you try to do something to make people to please people, and it doesn't work. There is this feeling of irreality, of I don't know, being in a different movie or not understanding what is going on.
It's
like being
For me,
surreal, I
what-
guess.
Oops, sorry. Go ahead, Kevin.
I was just gonna say like being surreal, I guess. Is that what you mean by reality?
Yeah. I
I
remember
think
the
John
first time
uses
that I
that
saw-
term. He
Say it
says
again?
it like, so I think John said it in the one with Rafe Kelly, which I listened to recently, that surreality and domicide are often related, like someone experiencing that because the new reality is not connected to them. And he says a lot of people will use the term like they're feeling surreal.
There are things that there is no way that you can explain. For example, the first time that I saw snow out of my window, because I grew up in Brazil without snow, and now I am in Germany. And the first time that I saw everything white outside of my window, I cannot explain the feeling. It was the feeling of the world being wrong, as if they had erased the colors. Yes, it's difficult to imagine if you have
Erase
never
the
gone through it.
colors. Interesting. I hadn't thought about it along those lines. Because everyone else is like, oh, it's white. And you're like, yeah, but because all the other
But it
colors are
shouldn't be.
covered. Interesting.
And
Yeah,
everybody
we're
knew
actually like
things.
accommodated. I had a friend, I'm in North Carolina and there's a lot of trees here. And I had a friend who went to college here, and she moved to California, and she commented that one of the things she experienced was a lack of trees became an issue, and the seasonal change. Like she had become accustomed in her life that there was like a spring and a winter and a fall, and there was some snow and all these transitions. And then the trees were deciduous and changed colors and dropped their leaves. And so there's this whole thing that went on around her entire childhood. And then she moved to a place that's kind of like a desert. There, they brought some water in California, and she said they just don't have as many trees, and so you can see farther. Like when you're on the highway, you can see more stuff developed. And in North Carolina, she's like, you drive around and there's as much development in areas, but you don't see it all at once because of all the trees. And it makes the place feel different to her. Just all these sort of very subtle things, I think, that connect us to places. Snow.
Feeling of confusion, of not knowing who you are, or not knowing how the world is. I remember that there are all these rules and these things that everybody knows, but you don't. For example, if you are in the subway, that they have these maps and these directions, and the information is all there, and everybody knows how to read it. And in Brazil, we just ask people. We would ask people, and they would look at me as if I was an alien, because it's right there. The information is right there. This feeling of insecurity, of not knowing what to pay attention to, where to get the information. That is very much what I.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's very much what I imagined, that it being connected to the thing that was being described in the Awakening from the Meaning crisis, this not knowing how the world is, not knowing who you are, not knowing how you fit in. That's
like
at
back
least
in,
what I associate with it. There's a bit of a delay, sorry.
right. That's why we keep talking. We're not like being rude. It's an artifact of the format. Yeah, like that interactive feeling, like it's a place that, Kevin was saying something that made me think of Cheers. And like even in a city environment, like where people will go into a bar or some place that they go to regularly, and the fact that there's like people in there that know your name from the song, that's a kind of like coming home. So you come into the place and be like, Norm or Kevin, and then you're like, okay, and I know this character, and I know they're going to do that, and I know this person, and they're going to be like that, and whatever. It's like you have some capability with that social landscape, your familiar territory, and that's a kind of, I think, that connection feels to me like not domicide, but like the lack of domicide. And I will hand off.
Yeah, there's something. Oh, go ahead, Kara.
No, I just wanted to invite you to share your experience.
Oh, I think, well, something came up, I think, between Matthew and Valeria about this, like, which I didn't really think about it, but I can relate to it too, where like if there's a seasonal change, like something about how you relate to the seasons and the way that time passes or nature unfolds or stuff like that, that can also maybe kind of shift one closer to the sense of domicide. And I remember because I'm in Texas, and snow is not something we get, at least in kind of central and southern parts of Texas. And it's funny because the I at some point, we had some energy grid issues because we have not necessarily built for that kind of weather. But I remember thinking, like, during that time, I was like, man, like, I'm in Texas, I'm not supposed to be experiencing this. Like, this is not like, kind of built into my understanding, right, and how I interact in this space. And it's kind of curious to me because I don't, it's it's something that is very subtle, and just like, because it was also in the trees difference that Matthew mentioned. But then there's another element that Matthew brought up, which Cheers, for people who don't know, is this an old TV show where people basically, like, I think it's entirely shot inside of this like one bar in New York. I'm not sure where it is.
Boston.
Boston, thank you. And it's, you know, and it's funny because that's actually kind of something similar to what I experienced in my previous city, San Marcos, Texas, where it's like, you know, there were quite a few people in the place, but if I just went to the same places, right, there was kind of an ongoing, you know, theme of events, or the same kind of people would host things, and there was some sense of connection to the culture, even if the same people weren't around. There was like kind of a way to navigate that. So yeah, that's I'll stop there.
Where do we want to go next?
So next, I wanted to go to ways of coping, but maybe through stories, or if you guys have no stories of coping with Domicide, or friends coping with Domicide, perhaps just like what you read.
I have a story I could share, but I'm happy
Okay.
to let somebody else lead. The place I was going to say is it struck me at some point that I was very connected physically to the place where I grew up, because I spent a lot of time playing outside in the yard and the woods around my house. And I knew it in such detail that, like, you know, little places had names and that kind of stuff. And so it really, that became like my big expanded playground. And it occurred to me that as I've moved around through the years, as I got older, and I went to school, and then I moved over here for a job, and I went over there for a different job, like I get a disconnection from the place. Like the yard and the house, you're just like, yeah, it's a yard, it's a place. And at some point I'll move and I'll go some other place. So I don't have to really know it. And I decided that in the place that I'm at now, I'm like, I want to feel as connected to this place now as I felt to my place when I was a kid. And so I intentionally, so this is my thing, I intentionally tried to create a connection to the place, mostly just by interacting with it. So like having a little garden and doing some yard sculpture type stuff, and going back to meditating, going back to the same places again and again, seeing what's more at different times, seeing it change through the seasons. All of that ended up sort of cultivating a connection to place, which is, I think, just one aspect of Domicide, can be place. I think people is another big part of it. But anyway, so I was able to kind of intentionally reanimate the space in which I lived by doing that. Like, and now there are little spots in my yard and stuff that have names and, you know, have meaning to me. Like, oh yeah, that's the place where I sit and meditate. You know, that's got a really good sun in the morning. There's places that got created that were used to just be, that's the woods, or that's the yard. So I think that gave it depth that it didn't have, because I looked at it and interacted with it.
Reminded me of the turtle story, that we carry our memories like the turtle shell. So our home is in our memories, but it feels like you can recreate your turtle shell from, it doesn't matter where you move.
So it's a good shell.
Yeah, I coined that story to Valeria. So Valeria, how about you?
The story, I think we were discussing if it's possible to carry your home with you like a turtle, and then Gilad said Domicide was like a turtle without a shell, because it's not only losing your home, it's losing the thing that allows you to be in the world. So it was something deeper than just losing your physical home. It's losing the structure that allows you to function. I think that's the story that we made with the turtle without the shell, or the snail without the little. We were talking about coping, and I was thinking about the things that I that have helped me. And connecting to the sacred, or something that felt sacred for me, together with other people, was something that really helped me. I remember we were in this meditation retreat, and I still could not speak the language very well, but we were doing these rituals together, and it was not a retreat center that we did our retreats on. It was a normal vacation home that you could rent for 12, 15 people, and but we always did our meditation retreats there, and we decorated it together, and then we did a little ceremony to make the house our retreat space for the week or the 2 weeks. And we did this rituals together, and then we did the ritual to undo that. So, in a sense, we created this space there that felt like home for something, that allowed me to connect to something that was deep enough that I could bind myself to the new place somehow. And then when I was painting my flat here, I remember almost ritually painting the walls. And while I was painting the walls, I was like painting my heart and painting myself, and physically binding myself to the place. And that helped me. That intentionality of making this my home has helped me home me again in this new land with the new people.
I love that. Actually, painting your heart, your name, your home, name of your mother, your grandmother, like all the ancestors on your wall, and you paint it. Plus, it did remind me of how Tom Sawyer was painting the fence. Like unrelated, it would only count if you would ask your neighbors to do it for you. But like, still, it's beautiful, actually. Amazing.
There's something about leaving, something that's intimate of you behind. That painting, like, I know it wasn't your intent there, but like when you find little marks on a door for like a child's height as they're growing, it certainly means a certain thing to the family that put it there. But it also, like, if you find that later, you're like, oh, like a little more, like things went on in this space, and there's a history of the inhabitants of this. And now I'm a little more connected because I know about the thing on the door. So I like the idea of leaving those behind for whoever occupies this space next. They'll find them, but they're going to be hidden.
Well, something that's curious about that is that imagine someone who didn't understand that convention, or like grew up in a family or a culture that doesn't happen. People don't mark that door. I just think, some jerk left these marks. Let me just, repair it and cover them up, right? And
I would like value it. It's like when I go, like a little archaeological find.
But that's because like you would have a way to relate it as an archaeological find, right? Where someone else might be like, oh, someone must have been moving something weird and it just made these lacerations over time, or whatever.
Or even if it's like they know exactly what it is, and they're just like, meh, not my kids, whatever.
Oh my God.
That's their, well, I mean, maybe they're like, I want a pure white frame around this door. I don't care about any of that stuff.
Yeah.
That's a reaction.
Those drawings, oh my God, no, those are not cave drawings. Not my kids. Yeah.
Look at these color choices in this room of hilarious.
I love it though. Like it don't fits very much like to the sunny disposition. So Kevin.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead, Kevin.
We are fighting for the spot.
No, it's funny because I was thinking about like, because I guess what the question or topic is like ways of coping with domicide, and I guess in some sense, because I've thought about like I lived in a lot of different places, not necessarily like very far geographically, but like apartment to apartment over the years. I know I've had at least like 20 roommates, like almost all of which have been good roommates and good relationships. But it's funny because like for several years, like I didn't really have a room. I was like, kind of like, where's like 5 people in an apartment. 3 bedrooms, and I was like on a couch. And so I think I got kind of used to trying to play the turtle game. It's like, okay, what's like the minimum set of things I can kind of have with me? And yeah, it's, I'm not sure I haven't even had like good responses to it, because it's like, even now that, I have this room, it's like, there's not a lot I feel like I've done with it. Like there's like a whiteboard on my wall, which is, I guess, helpful. Like a little meditation thing on the wall there, and painting, and a poster from a friend and former roommate. And like there's certain aspects I've done, right, to kind of like home myself in a new place, but I'm not sure I have consistently done that. I'm trying to think, like, why is that? Actually, I was thinking also about how I used to work in a math tutoring lab for my university in San Marcos. I remember that was like, because, and I forgot who brought it up earlier, but like this sense of like kind of knowing how to engage in the space, right, and kind of like it's like you kind of know what the roles are and how to interact and engage and all that. I definitely had that, I think, when working there, and it was like kind of one of the few places where I kind of felt like I belonged, so to speak, where it's like I kind of knew, like, even though the people would change like semester to semester, right? Some people graduate, some people come in. There was still like kind of and same thing with the coworkers, right? People would kind of go in and go off, but it was still like I kind of knew how to engage, right? And I think it's because I had practice. And even before I was tutoring in San Marcos, so it's tutored in my hometown at a community college for the same topic. So I had some kind of practice of like, how do I engage this space, and like what's the way to do this? And yeah, I mean, that's interesting, because that's one of the things I miss a lot was that sense of like being able to connect in that way. And then now it's, thinking about like, what have I done to like compensate for like that kind of loss? I think, to be honest, it's like stuff like the Discord server, where it's like trying to engage these different kinds of practices, right? Where there's a kind of consistency to it. And again, same kind of thing, like, some people will stay, some people like kind of go in and out. But it's like enough to like kind of have a sense of like, okay, I know what to do here. I know how to engage the space. And kind of importantly, the same thing with the tutoring stuff. It was like, it's developmental. It's like I'm actually not doing the same thing over and over. It's like there's some type of depth and growth in that space, which I guess is kind of maybe what the parkour kids were doing, where it's like, it's like it might be the same terrain they're engaging with over and over, but there's this kind of ongoing development of their capacity to engage with it, and to kind of see new opportunities and new ways to kind of fit in, or to take different risks, and to I guess to grow in that way.
Both you and Valeria are making me think of like nesting. So like there's some desire to make, when you go into a place where you're like, okay, it's nice, but it has to be mine. There has to be something here where you're like, someone else wouldn't have made that choice necessarily, and changing it in some ways. And then after you've changed it, you're like, okay, now I can sit, that operation of nesting, of changing a place, presumably toward the better for your needs. But just having touched it, like if you go into a place and you don't change anything about it, I think the nesting instinct makes you want to go like, it's have to do something here. And I wonder how that's tied to domicide. Well, not domicide, but like whatever the opposite of domicide is, domicile, building a dom.
Building, rebuilding. So rebuilding home, basically.
Stephanie mentioned the Discord, and it reminded me of one thing that has been super important for me in finding a home, and is this having found people with whom I can live different parts of myself, like the spiritual Buddhist meditation, but not talking about meditation, but actually meditating together, and talking about cognitive science, and talking and doing poetry readings. And
there's something magical about the continuity that Kevin and you just mentioned there, where it doesn't have to stay the same. In fact, you don't want it to stay the same. Like it has to evolve and have its own life. But like if you came back and it was different people every single time, then something's not going to develop there. Whereas if there is some of the same faces all the time, then it starts to become like you can connect to it better, maybe.
I wanted to thank Valeria for bringing up Discord. I actually, I am
Kevin did.
curious.
Kevin,
Yeah.
No, it doesn't matter.
Oh, sorry, Kevin. Sorry.
in Dialogos.
I want to mention the house. So you guys talked about nesting. I do remember that that case. Each time I would move anywhere, I would move the furnitures around. So basically, I could see the window. The first thing I wake up, it's I can look at the window. I can look at the shades of the trees. So if, let's say, bed would look away from the window, I would like turn the bed around so that I could see the windows, because that was how I used to do it as a child. Like I could tree branches, light shining through trees was the first thing I seen every morning as a child. Like and shifting things around and building homes. Now we are in the virtual space, and let's say Discord community. Sorry, mirror reflection there. The Discord community. We are starting from scratch. We are rebuilding it. We are shaping it again. We are moving things around. We are changing the channels a little bit, and it feels like it's necessary to build a home. If it's a home, if it's a place, that's why I placed the Discord community near the home. It's like little islands of homes that we have. Okay, let me show you guys the symbolism. You guys see the symbolism? There. Ooh.
Definite, very clear.
Yeah. By the way, my friend EM painted this painting, and that painting was, she called home. And I was like, why is it all in the sky? Because she's like, it's so hard to get there. It's like so unobtainable.
Oh.
It's like you have to climb all the time through that's building those little floating islands that look like a little bit from Zelda somewhere. Yeah. I'm thinking about it. So we moved into new era where we have digitalized communications. I spoke with people in the comment section about meeting in real life, and it is very much a great possibility. So Nahama, Upcycle Club, Shane, Dust to Dust, thank you all for coming in. Let me check if there is somebody else. No, but like I'm happy so many people showed up anyway. We all scattered in different parts of the globe, and even here in the room, like Valeria and I from Europe, you guys from US, and we are still in a way we are having a bonfire together where we talk to each other, we exchange ideas. Like the thing that is missing is actually kinesthetic, so touch, smell, but like I will have to use my imagination. Yeah. So, yeah, Discord communities, they are the new way of connecting to other people.
I'd like to point out there that
yeah.
I like the idea of it becoming a home or a part of your home. Like that's like one room that you can connect to like a certain group, depending on your interests. So I really like that structure of Discord. But something that I would not have anticipated is the connection that you feel when you're doing things that are in real time together. So either audio discussions or audio video discussions. There's something about it being interactive in the moment where everybody is there together, even though we're physically all over the world, that makes it like a place. It makes it a lot more real and authentic, as opposed to where you're just like reading somebody's post and you can kind of get, that sometimes is a good format for when you want to get your ideas straight before you project them. So I'm not saying never do that. I'm saying that like a Discord where it's pure text feels very different to me than the parts of this server where, we're meeting in real time.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up, because that's a weird, schism that feels like has kind of naturally emerged. I'm not active in a lot of Discord servers. I've joined like way too many Discord servers, but I don't
Right.
and it was like, kind of like, oh, what's this all about? And then, got bored, distracted, and forgot about them. But I've noticed that like it's easier for them to be strictly text if it's like kind of like one of them's focused on like kind of basically like academic economic stuff. People are like kind of teaching themselves, and it's really cool. Like it's actually like people basically kind of pseudonymously giving free mentorships to people who are in high school in different countries trying to like, find their way into the field and like what's the best route to do that. So sometimes they do have presentations, but like that's more like, people probably in grad school or trying to like, practice something and build their capacity in that way. But yeah, I do find it's kind of interesting, at least my experience of the Waking from the Meaning Crisis Discord, where like it feels like the people who are most active in the practices don't spend a lot of time in the text channels. And I'm also kind of guilty of that. I've been trying to change, but I also realized that I think I just had an aversion to like the old school text, like, wall, where it's just ongoing scrolls. There's no real way to sort it. I can search, but like, it's just something kind of maybe overwhelming about that. But thankfully, they're like building it close to Reddit, where it's like a forum channel where you can sort by like recently active or, kind of in that nature. So I realized like it may not have been the channels per se, it might have just been the kind of format that I've been aversive to. And also kind of just the nature of, I think, what a lot of Vervaeke is trying to bring to the forefront, which is like these actual practices. Like that's what matters. It's like, and like what Matthew's saying, it's like really helpful for me to write out stuff to be like, okay, like how do I understand this? Can I like actually like represent this and reformulate this in a way that makes sense to me and maybe is helpful to someone else? And also so people can kind of look at, like, I spell out directly, here's what I think is the case, and they can kind of point out, no, you're missing this, or that sounds right, but this sounds wrong, which I find very helpful. But that's not kind of why I'm there, right? I'm there for the actual practices, and that's kind of what the pull for me is. But I guess I'm kind of not shocked, but I guess kind of surprised that there's such a kind of a very clear cleaving. And maybe it's also a time zone thing, right? There's people in Australia that maybe a lot of events don't work for, and maybe they do their own kind of thing. Which I thought about before, but anyway, yeah, into thought.
It strikes me as like a couple of different, I don't know if it's so much a cleaving as it's just like different practices. And so like interacting on channels, hopefully in a useful way, in a text way that can be like a slow back and forth where each person can really think about what they can go, I kind of remember, but I'm going to look that up before I comment on it. It can be that kind of thing. So it's not to say like this is better and that's bad. I was just surprised that like in this interactive space, which I didn't have before, I think Zoom call was a pretty esoteric thing before about 3 years ago. And so like how much is there that is similar to actual, having a live conversation with somebody who's near me, like we could go to a coffee shop, but this is like energy wise so much more efficient. And you can find the people who want to have that conversation who might be geographically dispersed. So I think both of those are useful.
I remembered another story connected to home and regrowing home. Because I was missing home so much in Poland, I had to kind of build a wall where I would remember only the worst, scariest parts about Ukraine. And that would make me not to want to go back there so easily. So I would it's like, on one side, I would want to see my family. On the other side, it's way easier for them to come and visit me. because I don't want to, like I completely tried to cut myself off, which was kind of, because it's not exactly truth, it's an illusion, it's a protective mechanism. The truth was coming through from time to time, was bothering me. And so a friend of mine recommended Hellinger's family constellations. And she said, just go check it out. It just takes you 8 hours. That's it. After 8 hours, you will know everything. So I go there, and there's like this group of people. We kind of theatrically reenact what is on our heart. And I'm like, not a secret. I'm reenacting why it is difficult for me to travel back to Ukraine. And like actually. And then people would play different roles. Somebody would be the Ukraine. Somebody would be the friends I had in Ukraine. Somebody would represent political system. And I would have to talk to each of them to heal, let's say, the trauma and stuff. And I came out of that session respecting my roots. I understood something. Negating where you came from just because you can't go back. There is a reason why you left and you can't go back. But completely dismissing it, everything about it as a bad experience, was a mistake. It was something that would like shake my identity. So accepting the good parts, saying, well, yeah, the bad parts, I still see you, but you're like, it's manageable. So the truth, facing reality helped, even though it was reenacted through people and actors in 8-hour session. Yeah. And I was thinking about the importance of our roots, of respecting where we came from, of respecting ancestor. Like, even if we, let's say, do not love all our family members, we're critical, yet we have to accept that they're part of us. They're part of what builds us. That actually contribute a lot to the meaning in my life, finding happiness. It was like 6 years ago, guys. Still grateful. What do you think about that, Valeria?
Actually, I was thinking about John Vervaeke, and choosing to talk so much about Neoplatonism, and because when we think about ancestors, we usually think about, I don't know, indigenous people and something magical, and I've seen people criticizing him for going to the Greeks who care about Greek philosophy. But if you think about how much of our the way that we think was shaped by those people, what he is doing is kind of honoring the ancestors that gave us the basis for how we think and see the world. At least the thing that we have in common here as people from the Western civilization, because we are all from different countries. So the way what I was thinking was about this kind of ancestors way back then that shaped us, how we think in a way that's so profound that we do not even recognize it as something that has shaped us, because it just appears to us as the way that the world is. That was what was going through my mind when I heard you talk, Eric. It's something completely different than what you were talking about, but that was what was up.
For me, part of it was when you said that Ukraine had gotten cast as a bad place in your head, or you realized that you had sort of summarized it, summary judgment, and went like bad. That that seems like you doing Domicide like there was like you had a connection to the place and you didn't want to feel that pull anymore. And you were like, it's bad. And then you frame it that way and deal with, and that is like an active domicide of your connection to the prior place. And it struck me that that was like a really simplistic, superficial, like it's complete summary and judgment on one thingy. And so it's not deep and nuanced and all that. And that exercise that you did made you go into it and look at all the deep nuanced connections and roots. And you're like, oh, dang it, I still like the Ukraine. Like it prevented you from treating it so superficially. And so to the idea of, what do you do about domicide? I would say like, trying to connect to things more deeply and not just have this unnuanced view of something and symbolically go, it's bad.
I guess the thing that struck me about Kara's story, right, with the you call it was Hellinger's family constellations, is that right?
Hellinger, it's a
Hellinger.
German psychologist.
Awesome. It reminded me of, and I haven't like done a lot of work with this. I tried an exercise a friend suggested through I think internal family systems or IFS, which it's funny because like yeah, where do I want to go with this? There's this notion of trying to personify or like embody the things you have relationship to that seems important to do, which I guess Vervaeke would call serious play, or like what you gave sound like an example of that kind of thing, where it's like you're trying to like get in that space and try to have some insight that you wouldn't have otherwise, and something that's I guess somewhat related. It's it's not like how I was doing it wasn't kind of in that relationship of trying to represent these different aspects of where I was from, right, and trying to engage with them in conversation or dialogue. But I've done this in the past where, like, if I'm ever like conflicted about something, like a personal issue, or it's usually a personal issue, I think. I'll oftentimes find it helpful to kind of write like a dialogue, and it's and trying to be too nitpicky about like what are the different voices coming from, but just like kind of have like kind of a statement of expression, and then like have this kind of back and forth between different like voices or different like kind of drives, say, and that's been oddly helpful because even though how do I even say it? It's like giving a voice to kind of each preference. It's like it gives it a chance to kind of have space and then like kind of be acknowledged, even though it's like, yeah, I'm really mad at like want to like mess this stuff up, or I like really want to hurt this person. It's like, okay, well, and then like other voices that can kind of counteract it and be like, okay, like that's understandable, and like I can kind of see how you feel that way, but then that can kind of like be a helpful process, which and I had gotten this idea I think from like kind of tangentially from like one random Australian poet who's kind of doing that in some of her writings, and then also some random Japanese cartoon that like had this character who it's a very different context. So but they had basically like they had fractured their personality in order to cope with like a serious trauma. And while I had not undergone that kind of experience, I thought, oh, that's a useful thing to have these different kind of sub personas, and because you'd basically have them dialogue with each other. And I was like, huh, we'll see what I can do with that. And that's been surprisingly helpful. And then later, whenever I heard Vervaeke mention like internal family systems, and I have a friend who's getting interested in that and learning like kind of methodology and how to do that or engage in that practice, I started to realize like, oh man, like I don't have the same kind of like I don't have the same roles like kind of built up in the voices I make dialogue with whenever I'm writing on a page. But it's like it does seem like a kind of similarity in the same way that you're describing Hellinger's family constellation, where it's like you're trying to get these different aspects and actually give them a voice, even though they're like they're really all like a part of you, but you're trying to like get some way to externalize them, engage with them in a helpful way. So anyway, that's what stood out to me. Yeah.
It's, something that comes to my mind, and I hear you speaking, Kevin, was an exercise that I used to do that was similar, and it was to in emotionally intense situations, write down everything that came to my mind, and then mark in a different color the things that felt like that's not, I would never say that, which is obviously not true, because everything that I thought, I wrote down. And then just like not me thoughts got a different color. And I remember that with time, they would get less extreme, because the things that I was not allowing myself to think, they increased the volume to be heard. So when I hate my husband, in the end was just like, I am very upset at him. But so what I thought while I heard you talking about is making a home in myself for those things that felt like they are not me, and I'm finding a way to listen to them and bring home to myself this parts of me that were unintegrated, that were exiled. That's what the internal family system calls them, exiled, actually.
Interesting in that exercise you just described, that you don't cross out some of the statements and go like, that's not me. You're like, no, yeah, you put it in a different color, but it's still there. Like it came out of my mind. I appreciate that.
I discovered a lot of anger that I carried in me. And with this exercise, that was not the written version, but with the images, there was a lot of anger. If I allowed my mind to produce any images that it wanted to break everything and explode the universe. And it was things that I have been very angry about. But with repeated sessions and listening to that frustration and to that anger and to those unprocessed things as they got more processed. Now the same part, when it's activated, it punches a sleeping bag in my imagination. It went from exploding the universe to punching a sleeping bag, punching a punching bag, not a sleeping bag, punching a punching bag.
Processing the feelings is very important, like as opposed to suppressing them. And losing connection to who you are, where you came from, being in completely different environment, ostracized, can be very damaging. And like I was dealing with it by just like, since I cannot have it, let me just make it why should I have it? It's not even worth it. Lie to myself. Self-deception. Instead of grieving over the idea that, yeah, you can have it. You have chosen a different road. You're in a different place, and like respect both experiences. That was definitely a hard shift. Like it also took time. It did not happen just through 1 8-hour session. It took, I think, maybe half a year afterwards of deep thinking about it. Like 8 hours, they just sparked, ignited the fire, and showed where to look.
Planted a seed.
Yes.
And then it grew.
So I'm actually, if you don't mind me asking about it, I'm curious about like if there was a sense of denial of like, well, I actually don't even want it. Like, I never even wanted that like path in life. That's like kind of like the sour grapes thing from Aesop's fables and the fox, or whatever. What was it that made you open to like the process of like maybe acknowledging there was something there you wanted? Like, does that make sense? Like if you're in this space of self-denial where it's like, I don't want the grapes, how did you get into like, what made you say, yeah, I'll go to this 8-hour practice and like, maybe bring up this thing that like, I don't really care about it, but like, does that make sense? Like,
Yeah,
what I'm
it
trying
does.
to, okay, yeah.
So I was looking for my place in life, and looking for a place in life in new societies. So we would participate in a lot of charities and a lot of activities. and yet always something was missing. And I was like, what is this missing? Like, I'm doing all of that thing. Like, why am I missing something? And connected to the family as well. I talk to my family every day. I have my own family, also very much participating in the life of my own family, everything. But there is something is missing. What is that? And meaning through service is something I always had, but yet still something was missing. So service did not help. Helping people did not help me as well. Yeah, weird. Like, I know it sounds strange, like it should be, but and what rooting myself in who I am, accepting this is who I am. So standing firmly with both feet. This is who I am. This is my home. All of that, like a turtle, put back on me, like my cast, whatever shall. And after that, every decision, it feels like it supercharged my, sorry, like my children.
So yeah.
There you go. Don't domicide it.
No. So it supercharged my agency. The decisions, the understanding behind each decision. I know I kind of, I don't like, I make mistakes, of course, as always, like as everybody, it's okay. But I am more sure, let's say, I'm more connected with why am I doing the thing.
That makes me think that if you have a solid feeling of, I keep wanting to say domicide, if you have a solid feeling of home, what is the benefit of that? Like, we're saying domicide bad. So like, what's the good side of not domiciding, that you have this home? And I think you're pointing at something like you're more rooted, you're more connected. And you said it like improves your agency, I think you said. And it struck me that while you do have more capability, whatever, you're willing to risk because you are more well-grounded. Like, you're like, okay, I'm secure, I'm protected, I have roots, I have these other people behind me. If something goes a little squiggly, they're not gonna diss me. They might comment, but they won't disconnect from me. So you have a place that you can extend from. And I wonder if some of that power that you feel of having like a solid home and connection to it enables you to sort of go further than you would if you were like having to stay in a position of feeling insecure. You're not quite sure if you're in the right place. You're not sure if you're with the right people. Like, if you're in that, you don't feel very powerful and connected. And that could be a limiting thing in your life.
One thing that I'm thinking about right now, it's gravity. And if you think about the space station, and it sounds fun, but they have all these problems there, like that what Matthew just did now, to just drink a sip of water. It's a whole complication, and things are always floating around. And if you want to sleep, you have to tie yourself to the bed. And there is this feeling that gravity gives us of knowing where down is and where up is. And if you have a place that you are bound to, where you are connected to, people are going to have influence in your life, right? They are going to limit in a way. They are going to constrain who you are in a way that if you are in a place where nobody cares, you are not constrained. But that gives you possibilities that you don't have if you're just floating around and not attached to anything and not attached to anybody. I don't know if the metaphor lands, but it felt very alive for me.
I think you did.
I have a bit of a clarifying question, because Kara, so you're talking about the right, so you're looking for your place in life and doing different, like, servicing people, and that gave you meaning, but you still felt like there's something missing. And then you made this comment about your agency was supercharged by something. And was that something by like this, like, was the supercharge coming from, you saw this kind of something missing, so then you went to the kind of practice of the family constellations, and then that is what supercharged you, or am I kind of misunderstanding that?
Imagine I'm floating in the wind. Like I'm going there and there. I'm traveling to different countries. I'm looking for the place. I'm building personality skills that I can make friends. That's basically the thing that I find most rewarding is talking to other people. But I'm still feel like I am floating, like that thing that turns around when the wind blows on it. And grounding, it's like, oh, I'm just there. I'm floating. I think I even wrote a poem inspired by Tao Te Ching, verse number 10, where I talk about floating, just letting life happen to me. And that felt absence of that excess of freedom, too much freedom, basically made me feel unhappy. Somehow I needed some sort of root grounding, like a tree. Like imagine there is a tree that is just like, yeah, I'm just traveling, like triad, just walking. The idea was that if I know who I am, where my roots are, if I respect everything about my past as well, like just basically not be ashamed that I am half Tatar, let's say, instead of saying, oh, Ukrainian, but like basically, no, I'm half Tatar, half Estonian. I was also a foreigner in Ukraine. But yeah, it's like very much like I'm also I was half Muslim. Yeah, that's how the people were calling me as a child. They were, she's gypsy. And I did not belong to any religion, let's say. I was baptized, but still like I come from half Muslim family as well, and I was baptized. It was like a weirdo, like, oh, she's baptized. So all of that was like that root thing did not work out for me very well until I actually had to build it. And the way I was like, okay, this is who I am. This is where I came from. Yes, I'm half of me is that, half of me is that. I had to integrate it in one being. Instead of like, yeah, I'm just doing stuff because I'm floating in the wind. No, it was supercharging agency would be, I'm doing a thing because I decided. Like this is the part. I don't know if I make any sense.
Well,
like,
I think it sounds like it was from kind of addressing these like different components that didn't seem to have like some common, like you didn't have a center of gravity, to use the metaphor, right? Which is kind of what maybe led to this floating around. And it sounds like it wasn't just that one kind of 8-hour session. It was like that plus all the other work that you're doing on top of that to try to like process it and figure out what does it actually mean to me. And that like, and is that what you mean by your, like that's what you were doing whenever you were trying to like create your own route, so to speak?
Yeah. But for example, what happened in 2022? So as I build up my route and I was respecting and loving everything about my home, about where I grew up, as I started loving it, Russia invades Ukraine. And my favorite place on earth, my grandmother's house being bombed, my mom's house being bombed, and my family had to run away. My sister, who bought a house in 2021, had to run away. All of that, so like that all of those things that I grew to love, they got destroyed. And so having roots in who I am, I had to rebuild again. Kind of this, instead of being caught by loss, I had to like defragment it, like find who are the perpetrators, what are the guilty party, why is it happened, and I needed to do all of that because my best friend is Russian. So like she's the painter, like I use her paintings. It was really hard for me to talk to her. And like I talk about it in my YouTube videos. It's not a secret, not a revelation. So even her and I discuss it on camera. But it was having a process of recognizing like an exercise where I am like that I actually got from family constellations, like from that 1 8-hour session. I actually understood how to kind of take apart different roles. Let's say this is the role of the army, this is the role of the government, this is the role, and this is the people, the normal people. How do you talk to normal people? Are you guilty? No. How the army? Now the army. So I talk in my head, I kind of reenact who is who, so that I would not kind of like
Combine them, mix them all together and just say
yes.
bad. Like they
Yeah.
have, you got to have nuance. You're like, no, I have a relationship with this aspect and that aspect and that, and some of them are good and some of them are horrible. So it's like way more nuanced after you went through it. Does that resonate?
Yes, and that's how it also aligned. By the way, like I had to deal with my past. What I did not like about my past. So I found those perpetrators and accepted. These are that little thing is not the entire thing is bad. This little thing was bad. The same I applied to dealing with war and destruction. And also I do feel sorry for the like this nostalgia for the grandma's house, but it helps to me to know that my grandma is happy. Like I talked to her today. She was complaining a bit that she misses her home and the aunts moved in and they're like, yes, I talk about like she talks about she just like fantasizes about aunts just like building ant castles in her home, in the living room, on the bed or something like that.
It's going to be remarkable if and when she gets to return.
Yeah, ants repair
even
the house.
Even just to visit her,
Oh my God, I love her so much. But like, so she's okay. She's living by the seaside now. And today she talked, oh, there was no bomb alarm, so she slept well. And yeah, those are the happy moments. And I respect that. But yeah, basically distinguishing what is your home and carry it with you and what is not your home and putting it away. That's what I'm trying to talk about.
Gotcha.
That's my way of dealing with domicide.
It's interesting that there's like a physical and a non-physical aspect here. Like we talked earlier about like these talismans where maybe there's some object or something from your childhood or from a place you lived. And you're like, oh, like when I feel a connection to it, did something to it that it now has magical connection to me. And then there are also like all these mental things, like you were just describing with your grandmother, where you have like, I feel a given way about whatever it is. Like it's not a physical thing that you have, but you have this nostalgia for it. And you're trying to figure out how that builds your home. Sorry, go ahead.
Allowing oneself to grieve, to accept and come in contact with the sense of disconnection. Because when I feel disconnected and I do not allow myself to feel the disconnection, I disconnect myself with myself even further, which makes it more difficult for me to have a hope of connecting to the world around me somehow. So allowing myself to feel the loneliness, the loss, the longing before I can build something again.
Which I guess, would you consider that as part of the grieving, I guess, behind that loss disconnection?
Right.
Okay.
There's like redefining your relationship to parts of it,
Mm.
as Kara was describing, is how like, but you have to go through, like you can't, it doesn't feel like it's just a mental decision making. Like it feels more complicated than that. Like you have to touch it emotionally to change how you feel about it.
Valeria, I want to ask you something. If it's possible, you tell me a story about the Brazil and all of us. Just anything, your favorite story about home.
We didn't have electricity, but I had a deer as a pet. And when yeah, she was half wild, and every time she would spend the day outside, and every evening my father whistled, she would come and have her meal and sleep on the porch where it was safe. And then one day she did not come home. So we're thinking about loss and grief. And you asked me a story about Brazil. I am thinking about. I was actually in touch with the feeling of there is a loss being in Germany. There is a feeling of loss compared to being in this rural area in Brazil where you have a half wild deer pet, and fruit that grew every year on the trees, and days that were always 11 or 12 or 13 hours long. There was no winter. There was always sunlight during the day, and then pitch darkness during the night. And as you were speaking, of course, my story is like not that there's nothing tragic about it, but that place doesn't exist anymore. There is no possibility of me returning to the place where I grew up because they have roads and electricity and modern farms, and so the place where I grew up doesn't exist anymore. It's completely different now.
Heraclitus can never step in the same river twice. Can never go home.
Mm.
Are we each supposed to share some home story,
Totally.
or are we wrapping up?
Yeah, but before we wrap up, I do want to listen to each of your
Okay.
story about home. Something
I'll
that
do a
connects with you with home.
I had a lot of small experiences when I was a kid that I still remember some of them, and it strikes me that they're like pretty trivial things, but I had a real connection to them. And a lot of times it was exploring something in great detail. So we had some tree frogs, and I had learned like a tree frog liked to be in a certain spot. So if you climbed at the side of our swing set when I was a kid, there's a big pipe across the top. And one of them didn't have an end cap on it. And for whatever reason, the tree frogs thought this was great. So there would often be a tree frog in there. So if you knew this about the swing set, then I would go on these little exploration raids of my yard. I'm like, okay, you got to check this spot. You got to check underneath the rock at the bottom of the stairs. And then you got to go over to the swing set and you got to look for that. And I had all these little, like I could just occupy myself for a period of time, checking in on all these little spots that I had spent time with, sometimes with a creature, often with a creature, or mossy spot or something like that. And so I had a real connection because of that stuff, which is very strange. It's probably an autistic thing. I don't know. But I remember from a childhood having that, and that created a real sense of nostalgia. And then as I grew up, and we moved away from there, I still had a very strong nostalgia for the place. And I went back to visit a couple times, and it took a couple times, but I eventually came to understand that my connection, my nostalgia was for a thing that didn't exist. Like it was a conceptual thing, my nostalgia. And that those things that I felt connected to, I could recreate elsewhere. And so because it was now, I understood it wasn't because of like that particular rock. It was like, no, having having that connection to the place in which you exist, that's the thing that I felt like it was lacking. And having gone back to where I grew up a couple of times, it sort of lost its magic over time. The people who lived there did different things with it. It looked less like the place. They changed the trees, they changed this. And as it got further away from the image in my head, I felt more and more disconnected. I'm just like, yeah, it's just a yard in a suburb. And so it changed from like super special nostalgic place to, oh, wow, to much more mundane, just another place. And it was my connection to the thing. And so even though that was a disconnection from something, it helped me realize that it was a more conceptual thing than I had allowed it to be, and that you could reestablish that kind of connection. Maybe not instantly, but you can aim at it. You become nostalgic for something else. I will pass.
Kevin.
Man, it's funny because I don't think I really have. I guess for context, my parents divorced when I was fairly young. I don't really remember it happening. I remember like some of the fights, but at least by the time I was in, I think, elementary school, they were more or less like split up. And so I kind of oscillate between different environments. And I was trying to think like, was there any place to and one memory came to mind. And it was elementary school because I ended up going to that same place, for I guess must have been like 5 years or so. And I remember because it's like a playground, and like we would have recess where kids take a break and go around and play. And I guess the thing I remember is that a friend of mine, who I'm still friends with, thankfully, I met him in first grade. That's when he moved out in that area. And I remember as adults, we must have been, I guess, going to college at that point. But and he went out of moved out of the area to go to college, but he'd come back and visit the town. And I remember one time we drove back to the elementary school, and it's funny to think about, I don't think we really had a reason, it wasn't like an explicit reason. It was like, hey, let's just go do this. It just kind of felt like a natural thing to do. And I remember us going there, and kind of the same thing that Matthew was describing, where it's like, some of the architecture changed. They had built certain things that weren't there before, and then there's kind of big open field where we used to fly kites basically every summer. Was started having more kind of concrete laid on it, and it was such an interesting kind of feeling of like, oh wait, this isn't the same place anymore. Like this isn't, and it's funny because there's something about that notion of like, oh wait, like the place isn't the meaning I assigned to it, right? It's kind of like different things, right? That's like the event and the meaning aren't identical, or aren't like kind of inseparably bound. And so that's like a thing I think that comes to mind when I think about this. And then even thinking about later in life, whenever I was my first couple years in college, I think I was like a student assistant for an auditorium, which had different plays or different musical stuff. And I remember they eventually tore it down. I remember when that happened, I remember having such a sense of oh no, that place is gonna be gone. That place where I spent all this time engaging with, interacting, and knowing how to navigate, it's that'll just be gone. And yeah, that was an interesting kind of experience where it kind of felt like I was losing something about I don't know, losing something about my because I didn't work there anymore, right? And it's the weird thing. It's not it's oh, it's going to change my day-to-day living. It's the notion of this space it's just not going to be there anymore, and that something about a piece of myself, it feels like it's going to be missing. and then like, having to come to terms with that, like, okay, well, that is what the world's like, right? It's the which I guess goes back to the Heraclitus, like, you step in the river and you don't step in the river at the same time. It's like there's like this kind of ever-changing dynamic nature that like, causes these connections to grow, and then they can get broken, and then the grieving process, and then it's just this, do it again. And I think that's a hard thing for me to remind myself of. Is like, okay, I need to keep doing that. Don't get what's the word? Don't get like jaded by the process, and just completely shut it down altogether, because that's probably no good. Yeah.
Yeah, what stood out to me, Kevin, you said meaning to a place. It's not the place itself, but the meaning. And Matthew said we are carrying it with us. We can recreate it anywhere. Yeah. And Valeria, half deer. Oh, half wild deer, sorry.
And a half a deer.
Half deer.
half
different
half
story.
A wild deer. So, oh my god, my joke did not work out. Let me try another one. Don't.
Editing.
No, I'm not. I'm not editing. I'm trying to visit Valeria. There we go.
I love that. So this is something it's an interesting thing in our Discord. It's not a magic trick thing, but it made me realize the first time I saw that how much the spaces behind each of us that were repeating time after time became a part of like the room in which we met. You're like, it's a complicated room. It's got a lot of decor in different sections. And Valeria always sits on the blue couch. Something like that. Like it became consistent. And then watching Kara like jump rooms was a bit surreal. She'd gone somewhere she
Very
couldn't go.
confusing.
But talking about recreating home, because week after week we used Valeria to host mindful relating sessions. And then once Valeria could not, and she said like, okay, Kara, you can host. You bet I was hosting from that spot. I even moved myself in a screen. Like, but usually when you host, you are like always for me at the
The
left
same
of
chair.
the screen. I know.
There you go. Do you remember when you changed the cover of the couch? Like somebody
Yeah,
and you put like a red cover on it, and we were all like, what has happened? Something's wrong. It was remarkable.
Isn't it funny the little things that home is, right? Like
Yeah.
we were talking about Domicide and home, and what this little detail of the bloody blue couch was enough to give us a little bit of a sense of home in the practice. Even I was not there, but the couch was there, so everything is good. Everything is the same.
It's a familiarity, and we knew how to react to the person on the couch, so it made it easier.
There you go.
Yeah, I want to say thank you to our another sponsor, Upcycle. Thank you so much, Jutek. Yeah, I appreciate it. I feel like I don't know how to react properly to gifts other than thank you, and like it feels like I have like a need to explain where I will spend it on, so I will just give it to my sister and let her spend her children. Boy and
I
a
gotta
girl.
say that I always appreciate when I hear the stories of what happened with whatever, like a gift, and you're like, I gave it to somebody, and you tell them the story, and you're like, oh, good, it's doing good in the world.
My sister has a YouTube channel about ovulation. So it's in Russian, but because of the war, the Russian YouTube channel got completely demonetized. So she started the one in English, where because she has a heavy accent, she reads her translated articles through robot, and then like the basal temperature, like, and it's like the robot reads it, but her audience is mainly in India, so people who can't afford to go to the doctor and stuff like that. And so I keep always advertising her YouTube channel, and Ovulation Diary is my sister's YouTube channel, and so I give it to her. She needs it more. Like I need little money, but she needs it way more. She's like, she lost her home. Thank you, Upcycle Club. I appreciate it a lot, and she does as well. I will tell her from who it is, and she will put the announcement on her YouTube channel. Thank you so much. Okay, guys. Now that we thank everybody everybody in the chat. So Nehama, Das to Das, Shane, and Upcycle Club. Thank you so much for showing up. I hope I didn't forget anyone. And Matthew, Kevin, and Valeria. About like the conversation. I mean, I don't know, do you guys think we reached the explaining Vervaeke to our friends level of conversation?
I think so. I mean, I think if you hear that word now of domicide, there may be a lot of things in your head, but you have a general sense of it. Yeah, there you go. And I find that's true of a lot. In our circling exercises, that just having explored a topic with other people in something approaching dialogos, like you get all these different perspectives and makes you think, what do I think? And then that's part of the exercise.
I wanted to disagree with something that you said a long time ago, Kara, that we are rebuilding the Discord from scratch. Because I don't think that we are. Like, I know the three of you, especially the two of you, since 2 years? Kevin, since about maybe a year. And we are not building that.
August 2020. I met you in August 2020.
And we are not building that from scratch. There is a feeling of in being there with all of you. There's a little bit of a feeling of home there. That we're changing the things on the surface, but the roots are the same. And that matters. At least it matters to me. So thank you.
I'm thank you everybody again, and please check out hopefully next week, but if I will not get enough participants, it will be in 2 weeks. I don't know yet what term we will be discussing. Perhaps reciprocal narrowing, perhaps. I will have to discuss it with my panel. Something that is salient to us.
So many possibilities.
There's something I wanted to mention, which I forgot to actually do this at the start of our conversation. But I hope what we've been able to do is to not just like give some technical definition, but also like how it relates to our own experience and like how to like incorporate that in the way we kind of navigate the world. And hopefully this is like, at least like, you know, what I would like to aspire to is to demonstrate like the motivation behind, I think, trying to assimilate the language, trying to do some of the practices, and hopefully what that affords us in these capacities to like open up and explore and kind of perspective take and kind of empathize and all that good stuff. So I feel like that was, at least I felt that happened on my end. So thank you all of y'all for affording that space.
You made me laugh because I realized that the idea of affording something was something that I think I first heard John say. Like, I'm sure a lot of people have said it over the years, but like that was where in my education, which just came late in the game. I'm like, oh yeah, to afford something, to make it possible so that that thing could happen. And then how often that word now gets used, and so now it's part of the language that I can communicate with other people who have that word. Thank you, Kara, for organizing this.